It's the International Soccer Preview. This is Series 15 of our MediaCast. It's the short version of Series 14 on Euro 2024 qualifying. We're looking at Group J: Portugal, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Iceland, Luxembourg, Slovakia, and Liechtenstein. Here we go. It's the International Soccer Preview, Series 15. This series is a shortened version of Series 14 and primarily part 3 of that series.
Okay, let's look at each team in Group J with a summary of their history and then a look at their recent form.
Okay, well, we begin with Portugal, and Portugal have had 3 good periods. 1966 was a spike, though only in World Cup play, finishing 3rd in the World Cup under the leadership of Eusebio. The second was around 1985, where they reached both the World and Euro Cups. Their third period is much longer, extending from 1996 in Euro Cup play and 2002 in World Cup action, but which has continued until the present. Led at first by team captain Luis Figo in the early period, and then Cristiano Ronaldo in the latter period. Euro Cup play has been more consistent than World Cup play, including a title win in 2016 and unfailing trips past the group stage. World Cup features a 4th place finish in 2006, but 2 out of 6 campaigns where they failed to pass the group stage. In qualification, they lack the consistency of a top-tier team, often finishing 2nd in their group.
Looking at their recent performance, so consistent has their strength been from the turn of the century that talk of golden generations is stretching the term like plastic wrap over an oversized plate. And yet the lack of success in the previous century and the size of the country does identify this as being an ongoing period rather than a permanent state of strength. Nevertheless, the wrap needs to be stretched further as they remain strong, even as Cristiano Ronaldo moves off the stage. A very tough Euro 2020 run made a round of 16 finish acceptable, and a quarterfinal appearance in World Cup 2022 is a good result. They also earned a solid result in UEFA Nations Cup 2022-23 League A play, finishing in 2nd place over Switzerland, just a point behind Spain.
All right, and our second team is Bosnia-Herzegovina. So there was a 6-year delay between their separation from Yugoslavia and their first qualification as an independent nation in 1998. Both tournaments show a similar pattern: a weak start with 4th place finishes in the group, then a good period in the middle where they reached playoffs, and that peaked with a World Cup appearance in 2014, but then a return to 4th place finishes in their most recent campaigns.
In terms of recent performance, their strong period of finishing in the top half of tables and advancing ended in 2018. Reaching a playoff structure in 2022 Euro Cup qualifying should not mask the fact that they finished 4th in the group. However, a good performance in UEFA Nations Cup 2022-23 earned them promotion to League A, winning all games at home to finish well ahead of Finland, with Romania coming last in the group.
All right. The third team is Iceland. And Iceland is generally a bottom half of the table team, rising above that only twice in their qualifying history before a strong period from 2014 to 2020. It was during a minor peak around the turn of the century that they came 3rd of 5 in 2004 Euro Cup qualifying, but the 2 campaigns prior had shown an improvement in their competitiveness, even if it hadn't shown in their final result. In light of that, their recent peak was remarkable, reaching the quarter-final of the 2016 Euro Cup, followed by a World Cup qualification. And these two were surrounded by finishes in the top half of the table where they reached playoffs.
Looking at their recent performance, even though it is just 1 week campaign since they last reached a playoff, there is a distinct feeling that the era is over. The retirement of key players who made up the strong squad and the lower quality replacements leave few doubters. Fifth of sixth in 2022 World Cup qualifying seems to have returned them to the bottom half of the table. Further evidence comes from their UEFA Nations Cup 2022-23 League B campaign, where they tied all games with Israel and Albania and missed a good chance at promotion with Russia disqualified from the group.
All right. Well, maybe surprisingly, Luxembourg is the fourth, the pot four team here. And sorry, I'm just trying to get the graphics in order for our YouTube watchers here. Okay, well, Luxembourg actually has a long soccer history, missing only the first World Cup and the first Euro Cup. Its soccer team has always been weak due to the country's small size. Its biggest success by far was its first Euro campaign in 1964. Having recently earned their first points over 6 World Cup campaigns, they took Netherlands and Denmark by surprise and came within a comb's tooth of the tournament, which only allowed 4 teams. After that, they returned to being a weak team, doing well to earn any points in their campaigns and suffering many campaigns where they didn't earn any points at all. Only in 1996 Euro Cup qualifying did they avoid a last place finish. However, since 2010, they have done so regularly, and in addition to being competitive with the teams at the bottom, they're cultivating seeds of being a spoiler team, seeds that have always been there, really.
Yeah, in terms of their recent performance, as you mentioned, from 2010, they have been earning 4 to 6 points in every campaign. It can't be rightly termed as improvement, but more like a pay raise that has remained at a higher level, but without change since. They are a threat to bigger teams, and recently that has manifested in World Cup play with a draw against eventual champions France in 2018, and an opening win over Ireland in 2022 World Cup qualification, both in the away legs. However, there are no spoiler results in recent Euro Cup qualification runs. Their current strength is mirrored well in their 2022-23 UEFA Nations League C campaign, where they lost only at home to Turkey to finish second behind them and ahead of Faroe Islands and Lithuania, suffering only a single draw in games with them.
All right. Well, as surprising as Luxembourg being a top 4 team is Slovakia being a top 5 team here. Slovakia descends from the intermittently successful Czechoslovakia, though it is Czech Republic who officially inherits the mantle. Slovakia has been fairly inconsistent. They finished in the middle of the table for most of their early history since 1996. They became more competitive in World Cup play and reached not only the World Cup, but the round of 16 in 2010, their only appearance at the tournament. That form did not appear in Euro Cup play until 2016, where they qualified for their first appearance at that tournament.
Looking at their recent performance, their World Cup and Euro Cup records do not match well. While they enjoyed a stronger period from 2006 in World Cup qualification, it fell off with a weaker finish in 2022 World Cup qualifying. It was only 10 years later when they showed good form in Euro Cup qualifying, but it continues now with a second appearance at the Cup in 2020. Their UEFA Nations League performance is something different altogether. Already in League C, having been relegated in 2020-21, they had another poor campaign in 2022-23, finishing behind Kazakhstan and Azerbaijan to remain at that level.
All right, and it is basically those UEFA Nations League performances that dictated the pots here. That's why they're top 5. Pot 6 team is Liechtenstein. So Liechtenstein is a tiny country and usually finishes at the bottom of the table. They have avoided that once in each tournament, finishing second last in the 2006 World Cup qualification and in 2016 Euro Cup qualification. In most campaigns, especially in Euro Cup qualifying, they earn at least a point and up to 7 or 8 points. usually at the expense of middling or weaker teams. But Portugal, Greece, and Ireland are their biggest scalps to date.
In terms of recent performance, their 2006 World Cup and 2008 Euro Cup campaigns were something of a strong period, where they earned 8 and 7 points respectively. In recent campaigns, it has only been a draw or two, a bit below their average. They have also looked a bit weaker in UEFA Nations League 2022-23, where in League D, they lost all games to Moldova, Latvia, and Andorra, teams they are expected to be competitive with.
All right, so that is the short history of the teams from Group J, and now we're going to move on to part 3 of Series 14, which is where Connor and I discuss the prospects of each of these teams in the 2024 Euro Cup qualifying. All right, well, that brings us to the end of the team-by-team overview. We move on to part 3, and we're going to begin with looking at the pots that the teams came from.
That's right. The pot's based on Nations League performance and not World Cup rankings. So the pot 1 team is Portugal. They finished second in their Nations League group, so that puts them in the middle of pot 1. The pot 2 team is Bosnia and Herzegovina. We saw that they were promoted to League A. The pot 3 team is Iceland. They were ranked second among all pot 3 teams. The pot 4 team is Luxembourg. They're kind of come from the middle of the pack there. The pot 5 team is Slovakia. A bit of a surprise, but they had a very poor Nations League campaign, which is why they find themselves in the same pot as Gibraltar and Malta. And then finally, the pot 6 teams. There's only 3 of them, but Liechtenstein, with their ghastly Nations League performance, were ranked last of all UEFA members, and so make up the pot 6 team.
All right, well, how strong a group would you say it is based on this?
Based on this, a lot of teams come from the middle or top of their pot, so I guess you could argue in one way that it was strong. But I think some of the Nations League performances aren't necessarily reflective of their general play. So I think Bosnia and Luxembourg certainly put in stronger Nations League performances than is kind of typical of them. Iceland and Slovakia weaker. So yeah, maybe it averages out.
Yeah, I would say so, except that Slovakia being the pot 5 team kind of makes it a bit of a tougher group as far as that goes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah. So let's. Sorry, yeah.
I was just gonna say they were the pot 5 team no one wanted.
Yeah, I would say so for sure. I mean, as you said, you could have gotten Gibraltar or Malta, and instead you end up with Slovakia in your group. Let's take a look at their rankings, though, in terms of FIFA and ELO.
Yeah, so we'll begin with Portugal. They're ranked 9th in FIFA and 5th in ELO. And they've actually been a top 10 team in the world since December 2016. And even then, they were only 11th. So, yeah, consistently top 10 in the world, Portugal.
Yes, definitely, though they don't always finish first in their group, as we saw, which we'll probably talk about in the discussion.
Yeah, next we have Bosnia-Herzegovina. They're currently 57th in FIFA and 59th in ELO. They did get as high as the 20s in both systems around kind of their strong period in around 2016, but even earlier than that when they qualified for the World Cup in 2014. So they have seen a bit of a decline since then.
Yeah, certainly that's their trajectory over the last little while. We move on to Iceland.
Yeah, and it's a similar story for Iceland. They're currently 63rd in FIFA and 72nd in ELO, so lower than Bosnia. But like Bosnia, they peaked into the 20s in both systems during their back-to-back World Cup and Euro qualifications and have fallen kind of steadily since then.
Yeah, but as you pointed out earlier, kind of fallen only to kind of where they were before their strong period. So that's all I have to say about that. Okay, Luxembourg.
Yeah, Luxembourg are currently 92nd in both systems. It's actually the first time they've been over 100 in both systems. So perhaps, again, that paints an upward trajectory trend. They've always been a little bit higher in the FIFA rankings than the ELO rankings, but both have shown kind of steady improvement. They were around the 150th mark just 6 years ago.
Yeah, and now we move on to Slovakia, where it becomes really clear that them being a pot 5 team is a bit of a misplacement.
Yeah, pot 5, but second overall among all these teams in FIFA rankings at 54th. They're a little bit behind at 64th in the ELO rankings. And actually, this is a historical low for them in terms of recent times. They've often been in the 30s and 40s, even the 20s at times. So it is a drop from their historical kind of average, you would say, but really compounded by some poor results recently.
Yeah, I mean, interestingly close to Bosnia-Herzegovina, second in FIFA, third just behind them in ELO rankings, but it sets up a kind of a good battle between them.
Yeah.
Finally, Liechtenstein.
Liechtenstein are 198th in FIFA and 190th in ELO. So they're about 100 spots lower than even Luxembourg, who, face value kind of may seem similar. And this is actually a downward trend for Liechtenstein. This is kind of a low point over the last decade for in both ranking systems for Liechtenstein. They were never tremendously high, but they were as high as 130 in FIFA in December 2014, and have been in the 180s and 170s for much of the last decade.
Yeah, so anyway you slice it, they're the weakest team in this group. Next, we're going to look at head-to-head to see if that offers a different perspective. And here we begin with we kind of organize it according to the team with the winning record.
That's right. And Portugal have played all other 5 teams in this group, so that gives us some good information to go off. Portugal has played Bosnia 4 times and has won 3 and tied the other.
Yeah, and that's pretty interesting. It was the 2010 World Cup and 2012 Euro Cup qualifying. They met in the regional playoff in both, and Portugal won them both, but in 2012 they actually tied in the first leg, and then Portugal thrashed them 6-2 in the second leg. So a bit of an interesting history there.
Yeah, very meaningful matches. Portugal versus Iceland, they've met 3 times. Portugal won 2 and they tied the other.
Yeah, that's also recent meetings, 2012 qualifying. And in 2016 group stage, Iceland not only tied them, but finished ahead of them in the group.
Right. Portugal and Luxembourg have met 12 times. Portugal's won 11, but Luxembourg has 1 win to their name.
Yeah, that's right. And one of them is that 1962 World Cup win by Luxembourg. I think that gave them their first competitive win in international soccer. They most recently met in 2022, and in 2020 also Portugal won all 4 meetings.
Yeah. Portugal and Slovakia, they've met 4 times, and Portugal has a record of 3 wins and a draw.
Yeah, less to say about this one. They met in 2000 and 2006, so not so relevant.
And then Portugal has played Liechtenstein 6 times and has won 5, tying the other.
Yeah, and their last meeting was in 2006 also. So let's look at Bosnia-Herzegovina here.
Bosnia has never met Iceland, but they have met Luxembourg 4 times and won all 4.
2012, their most recent meeting.
Versus Slovakia, Bosnia and Herzegovina have an even record. It's a win apiece.
Yeah, and interestingly, that was in 2014 World Cup qualifying, where they exchanged wins, but both of them won away.
Yeah. And then Bosnia has played Liechtenstein 6 times and won all 6 of those matches.
Yeah, most recently in 2020 Euro qualifying there. Okay, and on to Iceland.
Iceland has met Luxembourg twice, a win and a draw were the results.
And that was in 1994.
Iceland have not yet played Slovakia, but Iceland have played Liechtenstein. They have 4 wins, but also a draw and a loss.
That's right. But in 2022 World Cup qualifying, Iceland won both legs. Okay, Slovakia.
All right, so Slovakia versus Luxembourg. 4 wins from 4 games for Slovakia.
Yeah, last meeting in 2016.
It's a less than perfect record against Liechtenstein, though. 6 wins and 2 draws.
Yeah, and that draw came in the last meeting in 2014 World Cup qualifying. So Slovakia may be a bit immunized there. And the last one we look at is Liechtenstein.
Yeah, Liechtenstein versus Luxembourg is our last matchup. And pot 6, Liechtenstein have the winning record.
That's right, and that actually should be down here. So that actually adds a bit of interest to the battle at the bottom.
Yeah, 2 wins for Liechtenstein coming in 2006 World Cup qualifying.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, next is the odds. And what are the odds makers saying here?
The odds to win the group, well, they're heavily slanted towards Portugal at 89%. Bosnia-Herzegovina are second with 10%, matched by Slovakia at 7.7%. I realize it doesn't equal 100%, but we kind of balance from different odds makers. That's why. The fourth favorite are Iceland to win the group at 4.7%, so an outside chance. And then Luxembourg have just a 0.4% chance, Liechtenstein 0.1% chance.
All right. Let's begin that discussion with those odds. Do you see Portugal as commanding as the odds make out?
Well, historically, Portugal haven't always won their groups, and even recently, and they didn't win their World Cup group. However, this time around, I do see them as the most likely winner. 89%, maybe a little high, but I'm not quite sure I see a challenger being consistent enough to knock them off the first place perch.
Yeah, I got to agree with that. I mean, the teams that might challenge them, all 3 teams, Slovakia, Bosnia-Herzegovina and Iceland, are all on a bit of a downward trajectory. And, they'll be kind of battling amongst each other, taking points off each other. So I don't think any of them can really mount a campaign to challenge Portugal.
Yeah, and I think that's the interesting thing is the 3 teams you mentioned are all on downward trajectories. They've all had poor campaigns recently in Euro or World Cup or Nations League or some combination of all of that. So, coming down from highs really of all making big tournaments within the last 10 or so years. So I think it's interesting. I think opportunity knocks for all 3 of these teams, but you can't really look at the form guide to say, which one of these 3 teams is going to take it.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to kind of look at the quality of players as far as that goes. And I mean, on that note, to kind of finish with Portugal, I think they will drop a few points here. I think they have dropped points to a lot of these teams. So, and then maybe the teams they drop points to will gain an advantage over that group of 3. Do you favor Bosnia and Herzegovina slightly above Slovakia, as the odds makers do?
I'm not sure I do. I know Slovakia are artificially low compared to their world rankings. I see them generally as a stronger team than Bosnia, and I think their recent form might be more of a blip that they may be able to recover from. I see that being a little bit more likely than Bosnia. Perhaps on a downward, partly because their last generation was really largely led by Edin Dzeko, who is, and some other key players too who aren't in the picture as much, or if they are, they're aging. So I probably slightly favor Slovakia out of that group.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of an interesting comparison. I mean, the loss of Edin Dzeko on Bosnia and Herzegovina to, say, Marek Hamšík on Slovakia, it does seem like a bit of a bigger loss to Bosnia-Herzegovina.
Yeah, you make a good point, though. Slovakia are also having to recover from the loss of, I think, their all-time appearance maker and goal scorer. So it's not easy for some of these kind of smaller or mid-sized countries to do.
Yeah. On the other hand, I mean, if we're throwing Iceland into the discussion, which I don't really, because I feel like Bosnia and Herzegovina and Slovakia both have more potential to recover than Iceland, in terms of lost players. I just don't see them recovering. Obviously, one of these teams is going to finish second, so we'll recover to a point. I don't think that's going to be Iceland.
Yeah, and I think when you look at the remaining squad, looking at players, players from Bosnia and Slovakia are on more kind of mid-sized or even second or third tier clubs than Iceland have.
Really, Iceland is kind of left bereft of players, whereas I think the other two teams have players kind of, coming up or a stronger ability to replace.
Yeah. What about Luxembourg, one of the teams on an upward trajectory? Do you see them influencing matters?
Influencing matters, yes. I think they will by taking points. I mean, they could kind of dictate who finishes fourth, for example, if they take a couple of points off of Iceland or off of one of the other teams, that could end up seeing them finishing fourth in the group. How about you?
I definitely see them taking points off these teams. None of these teams are solidly established as second tier clubs in Europe, and Luxembourg has been taking points off some of those second and third tier teams. So I think Luxembourg will have a lot of games to prove themselves, and I think they'll rise to the challenge in at least a couple of them.
Yeah, I do see Luxembourg as a bit of a spoiler team here. They've kind of, again, trajectory-wise, risen to that level. I'm not sure Liechtenstein have. Do you see? I mean, the odds are 0.4 Luxembourg, 0.1 Liechtenstein, which is a relatively big difference, putting Liechtenstein in the bottom for sure.
Yeah, I don't really see another scenario other than Liechtenstein finishing last.
Do you see Liechtenstein getting any spoiler results, even beating Luxembourg like they did in 2006?
I mean, the interesting part about the history of Liechtenstein is they always seem to get at least a point. They're very rarely shut out, so I think they'll probably continue that record. Not sure who it'll be against. It could be a relatively bigger fish than Luxembourg, but obviously that is probably the most likely opportunity for them.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm not sure I have anything to add here, but I am a bit frustrated with your lack of commitment here. So I ask you, who or how is this group going to end?
This is a tough one. Portugal, I think, have the quality to comfortably win this group. I am going to say Slovakia just ahead of Bosnia in second place. I say Iceland fourth. On the really bad end for Iceland, they could be competing with Luxembourg for fourth and fifth. I see that as a possibility. But I'll say Iceland fourth, Luxembourg fifth, and Liechtenstein in last.
Okay, well, we're actually dead the same here, because everything I was going to say, you said too. I think Slovakia and Bosnia-Herzegovina are a good battle for second, but I give Slovakia the edge. And as you said, I think further slippage from Iceland could land them in a battle with Luxembourg. Although going in, I would pick Iceland over Luxembourg. All right, well, we do have some games to look at. The March games have been played, and I have been keeping myself in the dark on the results, whereas Connor knows the results. So we're going to play a little game of predictions here and see how I do.
Yeah, so the first match is Bosnia at home to Iceland.
Yeah, well, Bosnia at home, I think, definitely gives them the edge, and we kind of gave them the overall edge there. So I think that's going to be 2-1 Bosnia-Herzegovina.
It was 3-0 for Bosnia, so slightly more convincing than you predicted.
Yeah, it was, and it's kind of what I worry about Iceland, that they'll come out looking very weak. I hope they don't, but what's next?
Next, we have Portugal at home to Liechtenstein. So perhaps the most imbalanced match of all.
Yeah, I think I'll just say 4-0 Portugal here. Not much to discuss.
4-0, not much to discuss
really?
Afterwards, yeah.
All right.
I might have predicted worse, but Liechtenstein, that's not horrible.
Yeah, definitely in the away game as well.
And
And yeah, what does that leave us?
finally, we have fifth pot 5 Slovakia at home to pot 4 Luxembourg.
Yeah, well, I'm not going to go by the pots here. I think Slovakia is a much stronger team than Luxembourg. I think there is an outside chance of Luxembourg taking points, but I think I would predict that more at home than away. So I'm going to say 2-0 Slovakia.
It actually was 0-0.
Oh,
for Luxembourg here on the road. We saw that they were a good road team.
Yeah.
I agree that points at home are more likely, but it's not out of character for them to pick up points away from home.
Right, and maybe we're wrong in predicting that Slovakia is going to bounce back from their downward trend. That's a pretty bad continuation of their poor form recently.
All right, we move on to round 2 then, beginning with Liechtenstein at home to Iceland.
Well, you said Liechtenstein gets points every tournament, and I think this is probably one of their best chances to do it. I'm just wondering if I'm bold enough to predict it, but I think I won't be. I think I'm going to say 2-1 Iceland here.
This game actually wasn't competitive at all. It was 7-0 for Iceland.
Whoa! Well, that's a bit of a comeback from their initial loss there. Hopefully that gives them a bit of confidence, but it's just beating up on the little guys, really.
But for Liechtenstein, I mean, even there we saw on a bit of a downward trajectory, and losing 7-0 to Iceland. This could be a worrying campaign for them.
Yeah, definitely. That's a pretty bad result at home.
Next, we have Luxembourg at home to Portugal.
Well, this looks like a top team against an almost bottom team. But honestly, I really wouldn't be surprised. I think Portugal is a bit inconsistent and maybe takes games like this for granted. So will I be bold enough to predict a tie? Well, no, I wouldn't be shocked by it. I'll say 2-0 Portugal, but I won't be shocked by a tie.
This was not a tie. This was another big away win. It was 6-0 for Portugal.
Sound like an idiot now. Okay.
I think, in fairness, Portugal on their day, can hammer pretty much 6 past anyone.
Oh yeah, absolutely. They did it 6-1 over Switzerland in the World Cup.
Yeah.
Okay, now the remaining match is a good matchup, hey?
Yeah, Slovakia at home to Bosnia. Possibly a very important one.
Yeah, well, I think I initially chose Slovakia both because they were at home and I considered them a little stronger. But now that I've seen that they tied Luxembourg at home, I'm being a bit doubtful. So I'm going to change from a 2-1 Slovakia win to a 1-1 draw.
In the end, it was 2-0 for Slovakia.
Oh, geez, I'm doing terribly in my predictions here. Okay. Well, now we can turn the tables, and we have the June games which haven't been played yet, and I'm going to ask you to predict. We have Luxembourg at home to Liechtenstein.
I think there is a bigger gulf between these teams than there was when Liechtenstein did the double over them previously, so I'm going to say 2-0 Luxembourg.
Yeah, and I'm actually even going to increase that to 3-0 because Liechtenstein have looked even weaker than usual here.
Yeah.
We have Iceland at home to Slovakia.
This is an intriguing one. I think Iceland's not an easy place to go, and has been a fortress in the past. But despite their big win, I worry that the Iceland that lost to Bosnia 3-0 will show up. I'm actually going to say Slovakia 2-1.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with you. I certainly wouldn't pick Iceland as the winner. I was thinking of a 1-1 draw here. Again, Slovakia tied Luxembourg, but maybe that's behind them now. What will I do? I will say I'll go 1-1 just to be different, but I definitely favor Slovakia.
All right. And then what's the last match?
That is Portugal versus Bosnia-Herzegovina. I believe they're first and second at this point.
Slovakia are second, having beaten Bosnia.
Oh, okay, that's right.
Yeah, at home, I if Bosnia was at home, I could see a possibility of drop points, but I don't really see Portugal dropping points here. I'm going to say 3-1 Portugal.
Yeah, again, I think Portugal is sometimes inconsistent enough that they could drop points at home, but I wouldn't predict it. I just wouldn't really be surprised if it happened. So I'm going to say 2-1 Portugal on that.
All right.
All right. Well, that brings us to the end of not only this group, but of our Euro Cup predictions. So I think, Connor, next we're going to move on to CONCACAF, and we'll be looking at the teams for the CONCACAF Gold Cup this summer.
All right. Well, it was great. I think we went through 53 teams during the series, so it was great. It was great to walk through it, and I look forward to the next one.